Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It or Quit It podcast, the career wake up call. How are you doing, Janji?
I'm good. Thank you very much. We still look amazing. Probably those who saw the previous episode, they notice we are in the same outfit.
Yeah,
No wonder why we are
that's
doing it
right.
on the same day.
That's exactly right. And if you remember, the last podcast episode we had was all about, 70%. This whole idea of, you have the vast majority of your day that is spent doing work that could feel mundane, it could feel transactional, but actually all of it is development opportunity. So if you feel like you're in a situation where your day job isn't developing you, I would encourage you to check out the last episode, because we do a deep dive into like how do you extract that value. One of the questions we found ourselves asking in the last episode was, well, what about career failures or setbacks? And like, how do we think about that as learning opportunities? And we thought, well, that feels like such a meaningful, topic that why not have a new episode specifically around that, right? So today, we would love to get into specifically the topic of the career moments you'd rather forget and why you shouldn't actually forget them.
Mm,
So, for a lot of us, and I think Johnji, you and I, as you sit in your career, you probably can think to three, four, five examples of things that didn't work out exactly as we expected. Maybe we didn't deliver the project, the way that was expected by the organization. Maybe there was a change in requirements that we didn't connect the dots and we missed something. But a lot of times we look to kind of move on to the next project and hopefully put that in our rear view and never think about it again, never talk about it again. But actually, that's probably a mistake because whether you're interviewing for a new job or, kind of wanting to develop in your current role, acknowledging those failures is important, but also showing people what you learned from that is incredibly important, right? So I think,
yeah.
today we're going to jump into a couple of specific questions around how do we look at failures. So,
Mm,
Junji, I think the first question that always comes to mind, and I've had again these conversations with my team, when they fail, there is a bit of shame. There is a bit of like, oh my gosh, what will my peers think? Or if this was given to someone else, they probably wouldn't have made that mistake. So there's shame, there's guilt, there's a lot of emotions that come from it. And sometimes we want to acknowledge it, and sometimes we just hope that no one noticed. Talk to me
mm,
about like that aspect of it. Like, how do we celebrate failures when there's this overarching sense of guilt, shame? We failed. Like, what is there to talk
yeah,
about?
yeah. Fantastic. Such an important topic, and I'm so glad that we have a bit of time to talk about this. So, just to kind of create some sort of clarity around what guilt, what shame is, imagine that they are basically emotional twins. So, guilt is something that when that says I did something bad. I feel guilty about letting someone down, hurting someone, or going against my own values. So that is a behavior that says, I did something bad. Whereas shame is much more identity related. Shame comes from, I did something bad, so I'm bad. That is a feeling that I'm not good, I can't do this, I'm useless. And the thing is that while when you are in the guilt, that can trigger actually some positive actions that can make you right, let me put this right, that can inspire you to take corrective actions or take learning or communicate about it. You can get into the empowered state from guilt. Shame is paralyzing, on the other hand. So, shame is a not very useful identity related space to be. Therefore, in coaching, we like to dig out those moments of shame. And very often, when people are stuck in some ways in their lives or in their career, there is an old shame there that is informing their future behaviors or where they are. Um, and the thing is that shame thrives in silence. So putting shame out there, talking about our mistakes is actually dissolving it. It's like Dracula, isn't it? So when the morning comes, it has to disappear. Therefore, talking about our mistakes is actually very therapeutic. It's straight away just by the fact that we are putting it out there, we are owning it, that takes the shame away. That turns it into something much more creative, into reflection, into growth, into apologizing sometimes,
Mhm.
into regret, but something that you do with that mistake rather than just bury it and let the shame haunt you and keep you stuck. So so the reason why we said that this topic might be worth an entire episode, because we want to be provocative. We not just want you to talk about your mistakes. We want you to celebrate it
Yeah.
and be your mistakes a therapeutic place for growth and for, recovery as well. How does that sound to you, or that concept?
Yeah, I think, as you were talking, right, one thing that came to mind is also caveating the difference between, when you feel like you made a mistake or there's a shame and guilt, but there's kind of a little bit more of a deeper sense of morality, right? So we're not talking about situations of harassment or
Mm,
situations at work that led you to feel a sense
mm,
of shame or guilt. There's speak up channels, there's lots of, so we're
mm,
talking about something different. We're talking about
mm,
failures in project deliverables or
mm,
missing timelines or deliverables. There always is kind of another piece of this that is bigger corporate morality, whistleblowers, shake up and those things. And there's trusted venues that you can speak up to
mm.
make sure. So I just want to make sure that one, we create a separation between
Really good point. So
different
we are talking
reasons.
about the shame that comes from our own mistake, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Now, I think you're right. But I do think it takes experience to have the self-confidence to tackle this. So if you're early in your career, and Janji, I would love for you to help us understand this one, right? So let's assume this is my first job in corporate America. I
Mm-hmm.
have all the desire, intention, I have positive intent, but I've made three mistakes already on a project, right? So already your manager has a little bit of a bias of recency. So they're going to see
Mm,
you as someone that immediately, right out of the gate, stumbled and had a couple of issues and maybe missed a couple of projects, and now you're a bit under the microscope. It's not exactly something you want to celebrate because you don't have a track record of success to balance it out. You only have these kind of mistakes or failures. What do you do with someone that's early in their
mm,
career and finds themselves in that? Because it could be very scary. It could be a very sense of like, am I even in the right place? Like I
mm,
had, early failures. And I think everyone in their career has this, by the way. It doesn't mean
mm.
you are in the wrong job or you're in the wrong career. You're just learning. But how do you give someone the confidence to even celebrate these things, but even, how do you even recover when you have only the mistakes early on?
Yeah. So let me ask you a seemingly not connected question. Do your kids ski
No, they
or ice
don't. They don't.
skate?
No,
No.
no, not yet.
So So if you saw kids skiing, being, first days on their skis, they fall all the time and
Mm,
they don't mind, they get back on it until they learn. And often it's perceived that's why it's much easier to learn skiing at a young age, because they don't mind the failure. They
mm,
don't, they don't pretend they haven't fallen, but they get back on the skis and they just keep going. Whereas when we are older, we are much more afraid of falling
yeah,
probably from a taller place as well. So my kind invite to anyone who is just starting out in corporate America or anyone else is that you're doing things at the first time. That's perfectly okay to fail. And your leader had the days of the first,
yeah.
the first days of their employment. I mean, I very much remember my very first day at a proper job. And the mistakes I was doing, and honestly speaking, those are the most hilarious stories at dinner parties these days. So it might seem really bad when you're in it, but the worst thing you can do is to hide it.
Yeah.
You I would encourage you to be totally transparent about it. Go through the front door, let your manager know for two reasons. One is that they can do something about it. So your
Mm,
manager is perfectly equipped to correct your mistakes. And anybody who's hiring a new, a fresh, graduate or someone who is starting new, they trust me, they prepared. They know that what risks are taking with having someone who doesn't have the experience yet. Also, they hopefully remember when they were newbies. And the other thing is, don't just admit you did a mistake and run away and
yeah.
get someone to fix it, but go there with your notepad and ask questions that are all about how can I fix this? What can I do differently next time? What would be your recommendation for me? What could have I done differently? So go there with the ambition of using this for the learning. And imagine your line manager, how can someone be, holding a bias when all they see is eagerness to learn?
Yeah.
That bias, the best way to dissolve that bias. So my recommendation would be get totally transparent about it and go there with at least three questions about how can you do this differently, how can you succeed in the future with a similar task, and just really take this as a fantastic learning opportunity.
When you were describing that, it brought me back to my very first job, right? So I started my career at Microsoft in like a very technical role. So yes, I went to school and I took all the IT classes and, kind of
Mm,
theoretically prepared for this. But once you get into the job, there's a lot of specifics about how, that company does IT, which is different than how I learned it in the
mm,
university. Now, I immediately found a peer that
mm,
would be my every time I was working on something, does this look right? Or can you look over my
mm,
shoulder? Or
mm,
I did something and I broke it. So can you come and fix this for me?
mm.
Early on, I saw it as this like, oh my gosh, I have this lucky person that's going to fix my problems. And I didn't care how they were fixing it. I only cared that they
That day,
resolved the barrier.
yeah.
So early on, it was okay. I kept tapping this person on the shoulder. Hey, can you help me fix this? Can you do this? But I was really asking him to just do the work. I wasn't
Mm,
actually asking to learn. It wasn't about until, 6 weeks in, 8 weeks in, I started asking the question, why did you do that? Or why are you approaching it this way? Because I started realizing I can't have my entire job be outsourced to my peer
mm.
every time
Yeah,
I run into a problem. I need to learn how he's doing the
yeah.
work. So I had to have the realization because he never stopped to explain what he's doing because he sees it as I have my own job. Now this guy's asking me to fix something. Let me just fix it for him and move on. So he doesn't necessarily have a desire to want to learn or educate me. And by the way,
Mm,
he's a very kind person. It's not that it's his job. I had to ask the question of, okay, let's take a
yeah,
step back. Why are you doing that? Why did I miss it? Why didn't I do that myself? And then I found out that I'm using this person less and less every day because I'm starting to learn it, right? And I
yeah,
think any of us who find ourselves in that situation, just make sure you're not asking for a free permission slip to not do your job, right? It's
yeah.
at some point those peers are going to stop helping you, when it's the sixth time, the seventh time you're asking. So find out why they're doing it the way they're doing it and see what you can learn from it. But I think,
Exactly. And we all know the phrase that you can ask a question once, twice, third time, it's gonna
yeah,
be raising eyebrows.
that's right.
So make sure that you really, from the first time, already go with the intention of learning.
That's right.
Brilliant. And just following on that note, so we talked about the peers, how they can help you and cover for you. That in many companies there are these buddy systems where you join a new organization and they assign a peer to you who's going to hold your hand in the first couple of months, probably, or at least weeks. But then there is the line manager, your boss. So what's the role of your line manager around your mistakes? What's your
Yeah.
view on that?
Yeah, so throughout my entire career, I've always found that celebrating failures and kind of rewarding people for taking bold, ambitious, almost impossible tasks is something you want to role model. You want to be able to
Mm,
show others that this is actually a behavior, even though the outcome didn't get to where we expected, the behavior of thinking differently or trying to be bold and approaching something is something you should celebrate. Now, I always look to line managers to reinforce that culture. Because
Mm,
individuals who are failing and trying to do things, they don't necessarily have the I don't know if it's bandwidth or reputation to kind of solve it or celebrate it themselves. So there's so many things that they can do to say, here's what I learned from it, or
mm,
here's, what I should have done differently. So they have that learning experience, but for others to see it or for the organization to appreciate it, the role of the manager is almost in the most important role that they can play. So there's always two or three things that I always ask every one of my people managers to kind of look at. One is you need to provide psychological safety for failure.
mm,
So even before someone tries something bold and ambitious and gets to a failure, you should almost set it up for even considering going down the road
yeah.
as this is bold, this is ambitious. Hey, we may not make it, but we've never tried anything like this in the company. Like those kind of statements and words inspire others. First, it
Mm,
inspires the person who's going to take on this challenge, like climbing Mount Everest. Saying that you
mm,
can do this before
mm,
trying to take that first step, it means a lot to that person because they feel like, okay, I have the psychological safety of my manager. They got my back. It's almost like, if you're walking down, in the circus, you're doing the high, walk across the rope. You know that safety net is down there, even though you
mm,
may be hundreds of feet in the air. There's a feeling of, okay, there's a safety net below me that can catch me in case this really goes wrongly, but I'm never going to fall. Like, that's not an option. But if it is, it's there. Your manager is your safety net for these projects. And if you're a
mm,
manager, you need to let your people know that you're the safety net. So what does that mean, right? So let's assume, okay, you've promoted, you've given them confidence that what they're doing is bold, it's ambitious, it might fail, but it's okay. You've said that up front. Then, when the failure happens, shared accountability is the
mm,
next thing. So, that person should never feel like they're on an island, that their manager is almost judging them like everyone else in the organization. As a manager, you need to stand next to that person and say, we failed, right? Not
mm,
not this person failed on my team, but me and this person together, we tried something, it didn't work. Here's the learnings that we have. And now all of a sudden it feels a little bit easier to take these bold challenges when you know your manager is going to stand right next to you, even when the spotlight is on the failure, because the
mm,
manager can give context. It's like, we could have chosen to do this the easy way like we do every year, but
mm,
we chose to be bold. We chose to do it differently because this is, how our market will respond, our consumers will respond to this. And we failed, but, we're still going to try this. And I think that language that a manager uses incredibly powerful. The last piece of this is make sure that as a manager, you encourage your employee to document the lessons learned. So,
mm,
yes, they ran into the issue. Let's now turn this into a learning opportunity for others. So, specifically, what I've asked my team to do is when we have a department meeting or maybe something a little bit bigger, where we all come together and we're reviewing stuff, if someone has failed, put together 1 or 2 pages on, yes, here's why we failed, here's the root cause, but here's what we learned, and here's what we're going to do differently. And go ahead and use that opportunity to share it out because now the person who failed comes off as a expert, someone that is a leader because they're sharing lessons that other people will not fall into the same trap. So yes, you failed, but you're preventing it from happening again by talking about it. And again, going back to the shame and guilt part, if you have shame and guilt, you're never going to stand up and talk about what you learned from
mm,
this. So that psychological safety of a manager saying, don't worry about the shame and guilt of it. Actually, here's 2 things that, 6 people can learn from so they don't run into this issue in the future. That's incredibly meaningful and powerful. And, it gives you a little bit of self-confidence that the next time you try something bold, you feel the sense of like, yeah, it could fail, but I'm more ambitious that it's going to work out than it's going to fail.
mm,
And that comes from repetition. So
mm,
throughout my career, I probably had, 5, 6, 7, 8 failures. All of them, I feel like I can never have that failure again because I really unpacked the learning. And I know the next time I go down that road, I'm not taking that same approach, but I would never have that decision if I didn't go through it. right? So it's kind of, you got
Yeah,
to wear it as a badge of honor, and I think you've seen this later in your career as a senior leader. The quality of that leader is the collection of their failures and what they learned, right? The more they've tried and failed, the more
yeah,
actually of a leader they seem like, and more of a someone that you want to put a bet on, right?
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
so those are kind of the ones that come to mind. Any thoughts on the leader role?
Yeah, fantastic collection. And a couple of thoughts that came to my mind while listening to you is something around fear culture. We've all seen leaders who ruled by fear. And I can't, really say that any of those leaders were talent magnets
Yeah,
or they were facilitating growth. And the reason is because only mediocrity thrives in fear. There is no innovation, no growth that is encouraged by fear. So, if you are a senior leader listening to us, reflect on this. What kind of leadership culture, what kind of leader you are, how you're creating a learning environment. And also, we all know, from talent reviews, when a leader had followers or they didn't, that's something that puts a mark on the leader as well. I mean, imagine a leader blaming the more junior
yeah,
for a mistake. That doesn't come through nicely. So it's actually the leader's own interest as well to really create a superb learning environment and support people growing, because that is actually putting creating or shaping their own image as a
yeah.
talent. So supporting others, people developer, those are all words that are, asked or questions that are asked at talent reviews. So there is mutual interest actually, and I
Yeah.
just wanted to call that out.
No, I like that.
Um,
And Janja, I guess let me ask you I love provocative questions because I think
yeah,
we always assume positive intent, great managers, great people, great culture organizationally. Let's talk about some of those companies that feel a little bit more cutthroat. It's me versus my peers. We're all moving up. We're trying to get promoted. A failure actually is not celebrated as a win. It's actually you're taking a step back from your peers because you have a failure and they don't. There are industries and companies
yeah,
out there that are like this, and managers not respecting the learning that came from the failure. They only see it as, well, you failed, right? What
yeah.
do you do in that situation? Do you actually become cautious and you just don't take bold attempts because culturally it's
So,
not rewarded?
so I would say, read the room. Don't do suicidal honesty. If that's not the environment that is celebrating your honesty, sincerity, self-reflection. If that's not the environment, don't do it. Do it for yourself. Nothing
Yeah,
stops you to have a journal and find a mentor outside of your organization, your previous boss, or somebody in the industry who you appreciate, or a peer who is experiencing the same thing. Do the learning for yourself. Then don't do suicidal honesty
yeah,
if that culture doesn't support that. Again, this is back to our point that we keep emphasizing on this podcast, that your career is yours. You are your own person. Own it. Don't outsource any element to others. Ask for help, but the decision, the ownership should be always with you. Don't be the victim of situations, be the creator. And that means that if the environment is not right for you, then hibernate, protect your talent, protect your learning, and see what you can learn in that environment. And if it fits your character because you're very competitive and you actually don't mind, fine, thrive in it.
yeah.
If it doesn't, get what you need to learn there and move on, because if there is a cultural clash between, the environment and the person will come out worse, right? The
Yeah.
environment won't collapse. So, guys, own it or quit it.
No, it's
That's,
it's very well said, right? Because I do think that early in your career, you need to basically understand organizationally, is this a value that they care about? Like you can
yeah,
hear, like there's certain industries where it's all performance based, it's driving top line growth. It's not a lot of we're here to coach and develop you and stuff like that. And if you're in a situation like that, you can't force it. So you do
No.
need to be a bit more calculated on how many decisions you make and how much you push. But even in more competitive industries that I've worked in, there's still value in thinking differently.
Mm,
So don't think about it as bold, choices that could fail. Think about it as, is there a way that I'm thinking about this problem differently than my peer set? Because if you are in those competitive environments, people who think differently stand out. So it's not that you made a very bold decision and now you risked $1 million of sales. It's actually, hey, the way you approach this project and who you brought into the project and how you found your stakeholders, maybe that's thinking differently. And that could be a way to kind of stand out amongst your peers without having to go all the way to failure. Now, the future of that, though, is one day when you're a manager, you have the power to create the culture. So, yes, it
yeah.
doesn't exist today when you don't have responsibilities, but it doesn't mean that the company can't eventually get there when you become a manager. So, I think you hold
Mm,
yourself accountable for one day
mm,
changing the culture, right? And that was something that was big for me is that there were things that I valued as an individual contributor that I never saw my managers appreciating or valuing back. So I kept it in my back pocket. And the moment I got the chance to be a leader, I did all of the things I
beautiful.
wished my manager would do with me. And that became my identity, right? And people
Beautiful.
appreciated me for it. It is different. But I didn't get the sense of like it'll never happen and therefore I should just forget about it. I just said not now, not yet.
Yeah.
So
Beautiful. My father used to tell us that when we were children, that the negative example is as valuable as the positive one. So I
very true.
guess, that's sometimes the best learning. You see a culture that, doesn't resonate with you, you see leadership style that doesn't help you to grow, and you immediately know, well, that's pretty ineffective. The day I
That's
become
right.
a manager, I'm gonna do it differently. So
Yeah, and it feels like
fantastic.
a sense of like accomplishment that like yeah,
Yeah.
eventually I got to the place where I was
Yes.
able to be the leader I wanted to
Yeah.
have. Right? So that's kind of cool.
Fantastic.
Let's talk about like the homework for this episode, right?
Mm,
We're getting to the end of it. We talked about how do you overcome that personal shame and guilt. We talked about the role of peers and managers in
mm,
helping you celebrate your success. So if if this is someone that's listening to this and they do have a couple of things that maybe they failed and they've never told anyone about it because they were ashamed. Or maybe they're about to try something that is very bold and they're scared about it could go wrong or it could go incredibly well. What should
yeah.
people do as their homework?
Well, we want to challenge you guys. We want to ask you to maybe look back a couple of months, or maybe you have recent experience, spot something that would qualify for a failure, maybe a spectacular failure, the bigger the better. And find a form of coming out. It could be a LinkedIn post, or it could be a presentation to your team, or it could be just a conversation, but bring it to the surface. Find a way to talk about it and see how it feels. So our homework for you, do a coming out on a really good example for making a mistake and how you're turning it into a learning opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. And it could be, maybe in a team meeting, something small where it's amongst people that you trust and they'll give you the space to be able to talk about it, but make sure it's applicable to others. Make sure other people feel like
Mm,
they've learned something about your experience that they can do differently in their job. And then if you're really bold and ambitious, put it on LinkedIn. Let it be part of your personal brand, what you represent, because you're starting to talk about failures and what you got from it, but there's recruiters that watch those things. There's peers. There's people that may be junior in your company
mm,
that will appreciate seeing that. And you would never know without putting it out there. So, depending on your
absolutely.
level of comfort of celebrating your failures, like, take some steps here to take ownership of it.
And if you feel really brave, tag us in, tag the Own It or Quit It podcast, refer to our episodes where you can blame us that we encouraged you to talk about your failures, and we'd love to read your story. You can send us private messages as well, but public would be the really good one. So
That's right.
guys, good luck, embrace your failures, and see you at the next episode.
See you next
Thanks,
time.
Jason. It was great
Thank
talking
you.
to you again. Bye.